This episode of Bend the Knee is brought to you by Lady Emily.
Ice and Fire podcast. I am Sir Matt, the Bud Knight.
And I am Sir Ezra, the Watchful. Welcome to our Song of Ice and Fire book club. Today we're into chapter 46, Daenerys 5 of A Game of Thrones. And in Fire and Blood, we are discussing a Surfeit of Ruler. Rulers. Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Rulers? I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? Who cares right now about Fire and Blood? You know? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah. You know, I mean, something you and I were talking about a little about Sir Ezra before we got off here. Fire and Blood kind of came out at not a great time, I think, for what it is. Some of these chapters in Fire and Blood, as I'm going through, when we first got it, I was like plowed through it.
Right.
Now I'm kind of going through it again. I'm like, it's kind of some chapters are like super exciting.
Yeah.
And other chapters are a little dry.
Yeah. I mean, as dry as what do you used to say? You used to say,
Yeah. You know, it's
sandwich?
like, you know, after Thanksgiving, how you've got like, you know, you get that couple day old turkey that you're plowing on for a couple weeks. Yeah. You ever just, you know, put it on some bread, some cold turkey on some bread without, you know, mayonnaise or mustard or
you're right.
anything. Just like that. Real dry, or when you, like kind of like your mouth when you wake up and you've been sleeping next to a fire, or like you got like a wood burner or a wood stove,
right?
Real dry,
dude. Could you imagine eating that turkey sandwich next to a wood burning, you know, stove with a glass of like red wine? How? I mean, I don't even know. If that would be rad.
Yeah, dry,
just real dry.
That's kind of what this chapter is. In Fire and Blood.
Well, what's crazy?
No, it's okay.
What's crazy about it is, like, for the 2 months, I guess, finishing out 2018 or whatever it was, like, yeah, I mean, cool. That gave you something. Like, I kind of regret not just plowing through all of it then. I only got like halfway through, and I was like, oh, good, I'm way ahead in the chapters. Like, read back through with Sir Matt, it'll be fine. But now I have like no drive. You know, I'm just looking at like show stuff and theories.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate, right? Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. It picks back up. Actually, it does.
Yeah. Well,
it definitely does. It's just this chapter, to be honest, is kind of like rereading the last chapter. And anyway, we'll get to that here in a bit. So,
sure.
But Sir Ezra, how are we doing today, man?
Doing good. Actually, great, fantastic, on a super nice high after. Well, we might as well tell everybody we're recording a little bit earlier than we normally do,
right?
Just because I had a little trip planned this coming weekend. So when you're listening to this,
I have some family coming in and out of town too. So there's probably going to be another trailer or something that's going to come out, and we're going to miss. But that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. No, hopefully that holds off until Super Bowl, and then we can get a nice good reaction there. But yeah, just been riding that trailer high. You know, I mean, it's been a good day, and as we said, once you listen to this, you will have hopefully listened to Raven's Nest, and that was just, again, I cannot emphasize how awesome that was. You know, to talk to everybody, just so cool.
Yeah.
So.
It was so much fun. It was absolutely a ton of fun to do. So.
Yeah. What about you, buddy? How you been?
I'm good, man. Today's my last Monday off, and then I'll return to a Monday through Friday schedule, kind of starting next week. So
nice.
Just kind of enjoying it. Kind of tired today, but so we recorded, for like 7 hours yesterday. So and doing some other channel work and just all the stuff for the podcast. So been putting in some hours these past 2 days, but it's good. It's great. Been updating the Instagram and all that stuff. So yeah.
It's good.
I'm good. I'm ready to go.
Nice. All right. Awesome. Well, do we have any
small council? Not really, because of how we're recording this. You know, we talked about the trailer.
Yeah.
The one that would have come out last Sunday, based upon when this episode will be released. So yeah, nothing in the 24 hours. I've just been on Twitter a little bit more, seeing more people break down the episode or that trailer, seeing some news, seeing different stuff, and still the big kind of takeaway we took from it, a lot of people saying that Jon looks kind of old in that statue compared to the other one. So maybe it's that Sansa and Arya don't survive. Again, I just think the more I having now about a day to think about it, I think it's just the way the statues look.
Okay. Yeah. It probably is. I mean, yeah. Just his beard was a little more, thicker, fuller. I mean, it's crazy the things that we pick at when we have just a teaser trailer. But yeah. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, HBO did tweet a single line from the trailer.
Oh yeah.
About 6 hours ago, as of this, and it's just that you have to protect him.
Wow.
Which is what Lyanna says to Ned at the Tower of Joy flashback scene. And it's what you hear Lyanna say as Jon walks past her tomb there. So
what are they saying to us? I mean, they're...
Yeah, he's important, man. He's the key. Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. So hopefully we'll
Who's his Kingsguard?
Oh, my. Wow. I mean, that would be... Yeah, because Dany's kind of forming her own, Queensguard, right?
Right.
So, yeah, that's pretty cool. Cool to think about.
So, yeah. So, all right. Well, yeah, other than that, not a lot of news just because of kind of how we recorded. So let's go ahead and jump into the Maester's study, Fire and Blood, a Surfeit of Ruler.
Yeah. Yeah, this, so again, just an excess of rulers, lots of people having their hands in the pot. And again, we're talking about Jaehaerys the first, Targaryen, the old king, the conciliator, the wise, whatever you want to call him.
Right.
Turning out, I think it was, someone had mentioned that I think it was Lord Adam Parker had said he's one of Gur's favorite Targaryen kings, or,
Right.
Which is neat. He's let's see, reigned for 55 years, something like that. So longest reigning monarch there. And this is really this chapter kind of focuses on leading into 50 AC. So you had that 2-year regency
gap.
Yeah,
right.
From 48 to 50. And
right, yeah, and so the last chapter, which was the Year of Three Brides, is kind of it's him choosing Alicent and what goes on there, and Rhaegar Baratheon and his kind of wanting to break that up. And this is really that second year, as you said, as we lead into, the continuation of that, getting ready to him becoming the king.
Right. So if you wanted a quick condensed version of this, if you went to the wiki, it's kind of the two headings that you'll get are like the minority on Dragonstone. So that's kind of talking about what happened there when he goes to Dragonstone with his sister and weds her behind his parents' backs, behind his mother's back, and then coming of age. So those are the two, chapters that, I think some of coming of age goes into the next chapter a little bit too, but by that time he's actually ruling around, in between 50 and 51 AC. So right. Quite a bit of stuff. I mean, it is a little bit of a repeat. They talk more about just the stuff that's going on with what's his name, Rhaegar Baratheon, and the trouble that he's kind of having with him. Again, we talked last week, or it was 2 weeks ago, right? That his stepdad, is
right, kind
of like ticked that that their marriage plans didn't go through. We were talking about the Year of the Three Brides, I think, and so Jaehaerys just does his own thing, and that it really does. They're always Rhaegar's trying to undo what's been done without losing face. We had the confrontation with the Kingsguard, which I thought was super epic. Rhaegar's made to kind of look like a fool in front of his men, but what's he going to do? I mean, you're not going to fight the Kingsguard and on Dragonstone there and risk your life. It just was silly just because he ran away with his sister and got married. But they're worried that the Faith is going to,
right,
do the same thing that they did to his father, Aegon.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, and something I want to point out here, just because I always point this out, Sir Ezra.
Yeah.
Right in the first chapter here, you have a quote by Septon Barth. "We are as the gods made us," wrote Septon Barth, "the wisest man to ever serve as hand of the king. Strong and weak, good and bad, cruel and kind, heroic and selfish. Know that if you would rule over the kingdoms of men." And I just think he says, wrote Septon Barth, the wisest man to ever serve as hand of the king. Mm-hmm. So there we go with another, you always have to take, especially Fire and Blood and World of Ice and Fire, with that kind of maester's perspective on it, right? So,
yeah, for sure.
Because clearly this was written before Tywin Lannister. So,
yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. So part of that's kind of the theme, actually. Septon Barth's words there that were just quoted by Sir Matt. Basically, Jaehaerys, it talks about some of the shortcomings of Rhaegar and then Baratheon, who did, pledge his support for Jaehaerys, helped him take the throne back, but then kind of maybe does it for his own selfish reasons. Maybe not. He's considered like at one point he's considered foolish, but yet not foolish. You know what I mean? Like the Maester kind of tells us that like some of the things he did in 49 AC were not wise, but yet, and he made him seem like the villain, but yet he was someone who won back the kingdom and put things right. So in that one last year of his life, we can't really judge him for all these things, because he is kind of cast as the villain a little bit when it comes to Jaehaerys and him coming back to take the throne. He's on Dragonstone, just kind of living there, and hasn't announced his bride. That's a whole big component to this, is he doesn't announce that he's married his sister, and that gives Rhaegar Baratheon more hope that maybe he can undo that marriage. But yeah, a couple other. I think I'm just going to kind of pull out a few things. Is that cool, Sir Matt?
Hey, go right ahead.
Okay, because a couple of things that I thought just in the start of this that were interesting. He actually plans at one point to go back and fight. Well, not fight, but to remove Jaehaerys from Dragonstone, bring him back, kind of by force. They talked about, well, he'll just hold up inside of Dragonstone. He's like, well, I'll just put it to siege. I'll attack it, and he's actually planning to move against the king here, and the queen, his mother, Alyssa, right, is trying to stop this, and eventually she points out, hold on a second, my son has dragons, my children have, right,
and we don't,
right, yeah, she actually does not have a dragon. The eldest sibling of Alyssa, Targaryen, is what's her name, Rhaena, is that right? So she was the queen who was kind of passed over, and she has a dragon too, so she was one of those three brides who was kind of married. She should have been considered for the crown, but wasn't. So let me read a little bit here. So I'm going to read from the wiki, actually. I've got the book in front of me too. I'll kind of go back and forth. But the coming of age, oh no, let me go back to his minority. Okay. Jaehaerys and Alysanne were seldom apart from each other during their time on Dragonstone. Those lords and council members who came to Dragonstone for consult with their king would be received by their king with his queen beside him. While on Dragonstone, Jaehaerys intended to rectify his own shortcomings before he came of age and took rule in his own hands. Okay, so one of the things, Maegor had all sorts of issues. His father, remember how his father, this was probably one of the coolest parts about Jaehaerys, is that his father was considered, wait a second, his father was considered weak and did not have Aenys. Remember? So Aenys and Maegor.
Right. Yep.
Aenys was considered to not be a strong warrior, not worthy of Blackfire, that type of thing. People considered him to be weak. Well, Jaehaerys, as I was reading today, on Dragonstone, man, he just trains.
Yeah. That's what I wanted to bring up too. The thing I that it reminds me of.
Yeah.
And this is what I think a lot of people are going to draw comparisons and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And some stuff I was reading on Reddit was, a lot of people don't think that Jon Snow may have the name Aegon in the books. He may also have the name Jaehaerys if R plus L equals J is true, and it all works out the way it should. Because this is, to me, the first thing I thought of was the comparison to Jon Snow.
Yeah.
And that Jon Snow is always pushing himself, training. Like he even fights Mance Rayder, right? Who's pretending to be Rattlesure, and Mance Rayder is like lays into him when they're fighting, and he says he continues to push himself. And I like this thing here too. It's kind of cool because you get at the beginning here, you get a little bit of Alicent and how she's like she has no haste in course. In court, like you kind of get both of them coming into their own roles, and you can see that they realize, I think, the world they're in, and you just had this whole deal with Maegor to where it's like we have to be better than that.
Yes.
And so it's like Jaehaerys was aware of his own shortcomings too, shortcomings he intended to rectify before he set the Iron Throne. His father, King Aenys, had been weak. And he was not the warrior that his brother Maegor was, and Jaehaerys was determined that no man would ever question his own courage at skill or arms, right? Which is where you were kind of leading.
Yeah.
He says he trains with him in the Castle Yord, shouting them to come at him harder, to press him, hurry him, attack him with everything they could.
Mm-hmm.
He works with sword and spear and mace and axe. So it's a hard, brutal regimen. And so let's see. I like this line here. It says, one evening after a day in which Jaehaerys was severely tested and battered, Maester Culper said to him, "Your Grace, why do you push yourself so harshly? The realm is at peace." The young king only smiled and replied, "The realm was at peace when my grandsire died, but scarcely had my father climbed onto the Iron Throne, then foes rose up on every side. They were testing him to learn if he was strong or weak. They will test me as well."
Yeah.
And maybe that's why Jaehaerys goes on to have this huge epic reign, is because he just realizes he's less kind of concerned about getting power and more kind of realizing I'm going to be the king. I need to be as good as I can. When you look at other people like Robert took the throne because he hated Rhaegar Targaryen. Joffrey wants the throne just because he just wants to be king. So, there's definitely kind of a difference there. Jaehaerys wants to be a good king rather than just, I just can't wait to be king, to quote the Lion King. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. You're totally right. I mean, it's that prep work that he puts in. It's almost like the Regency kind of helps him in a sense because he gets to kind of see what's going on. He's very wise. He sees through some of the plotting and the planning that's going on with his mother and and Rhaegar. I even think, as I was reading this, I got the feels that he and let me flip back here. Rhaena. All right, so Queen, air quote, Queen Rhaena was also the one who was, as I mentioned in the beginning, was away to the west on Fair Isle, has her own marriage, is just kind of done with this whole farce of ruling the Seven Kingdoms. And he doesn't, remember her mother doesn't get invited to her wedding. It's kind of done in haste. But Jaehaerys doesn't feel as slighted about not attending or giving her his blessing as he does with Rhaegar, taking his mother as his wife. So anyways, he seems to have a pretty decent relationship right now anyways with his elder sister, who again could have been queen, didn't resist, didn't put up much of a fight, So there's that, and it's a lot to kind of navigate. A lot of different people. So the title of this is a Surfeit of rulers. So a lot of different the success of people putting their hands in the pot, and to have someone as young as him rise and watch all this happening for 2 years in his regency is pretty cool. It says a lot about who he is, to kind of outmaneuver them, but also make them all feel, because there's no major. I mean, there's some skirmishes and some fighting that will come up later, but like he still threads a needle here and everybody gets along, and he has a great 55-year reign, and everybody
Yeah.
He's beloved.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's see here. So, yeah, they did. Okay, we were reading just about his minority there. Didn't want to be weak like his father. Yeah, training was brutal. Okay, while Jaehaerys and his new wife remained on Dragonstone, Lord Rhaegar, as we had said before, and Queen Alyssa Valerion at King's Landing plotted to undo the marriage. So we've talked about that. Let's move on here. After Jaehaerys and Alysanne did not return to King's Landing for the celebration, of their marriage, right in 50 AC. No, wait a second.
Where you?
So at King's Landing.
Okay, gotcha.
While the realm began to notice Jaehaerys' absence from court, there we go. He still doesn't return. So noticeably he's absent from court because remember they kind of disappeared in the night. Like they got on their dragons. They just kind of they got the heck out of there. The King's Guard caught up with them later. Fortnight after fortnight, they're staying there. And Alyssa and Rhaegar eventually agree to send ladies in waiting to Dragonstone to serve Alysanne. Their true purpose, however, was to try and persuade her to rescind the marriage. So, again, they didn't storm it by force. The king and queen, well, the regents, I should say, are trying to figure out how to undo this marriage, and they send the ladies in waiting. So, as another way to try to pull them apart. I think the more that they try to pull these two apart, it just kind of drives them closer and closer. It goes on. It actually tells a really kind of romantic, which is ironic, right? This brother and sister has this really romantic relationship. I mean, that it even says that they looked back on these early days at Dragonstone with great fondness because everyone was trying to split them apart. And they're this love story that kind of perseveres despite everyone, the strong powers, in the realm trying to force them apart, and they stay together. So,
yeah, and then going to have one of the greatest reigns ever. That was their challenge in the Game of Thrones, right?
Right.
It to them it is kind of the cool this love story you get between the two where it's kind of it feels like them together are trying to or have to play the Game of Thrones to ascend to the throne at the same time.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, and another cool part to this whole ladies in waiting situation, it goes into much more detail in the chapter. I'm again bouncing back and forth here between wiki and chapter because thank God the wiki's updated. There's a book called A Caution for Young Girls, and Rhaegar actually, it's hinted at that maybe he wanted these young girls to seduce Jaehaerys, but really it's the charm of Queen Alysanne that wins them over, and they become loyal to her and pledge themselves to her, and so it goes back and forth. You see Jaehaerys in a good light, and then his sister Queen Alysanne in also a good light, because we find out later she's super influential and is one of the greatest queens to ever
absolutely
rule. Yeah, she did a lot of good for the realm. So let's see here a little bit more. Meanwhile, more and more lords began to visit Jaehaerys on Dragonstone. At the same time, news of the marriage of Jaehaerys and Alysanne began to make its way through the Seven Kingdoms. They held back on that. Let's see if I can find this in the book. He's very purposeful kind of in saying that he's going to make this known to the realm in his own time. He doesn't want to. Let's see. He was especially anxious to learn. Okay, no, that was Rhaegar there. Yeah, he I'm trying to find it. But he holds back. It basically says, "I'll do this on my own terms." Which because I think he's cautious. He's kind of weighing what's happening in the Seven Kingdoms, and he knew that the faith was still kind of upset. With the potential of, his union to his sister. So, he kind of waits for these lords to kind of surround him and for him to gain a little more power, become a little closer to his coming of age. So then he can make his announcement and, show off his bride, his queen. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you still have Rhaegar Baratheon kind of sticking his head in there. And I like, in the text how in the audiobook you get it when you're listening to it, but these little quips here at like the end of the text, right?
Yeah.
like little asterisks where they stuff in here. And I like this one here. It's like asterisk number 3, which relates back, and it says, "It is said many years later, when King Aegon IV was in his cups, someone raised the matter in his presence. His Grace supposedly laughed and stated his conviction that if Lord Rogar were no fool, he would have instructed all of the maidens sent to Dragonstone in 50 AC to bed the young king, since the hand could not have known which of them Jaehaerys would prefer. This infamous suggestion has taken root against the small folk." But anyway, he's basically saying, if you really wanted to break up a wedding, you should have just sent like all of the girls you could possibly find and get them to fall in love with somebody else.
Right. Yeah. Because right above that, where you're reading there. Actually, just that and the page before it, his plan. I mean, he almost like kind of hand picks like some of the girls. It's sort of like,
right.
He's got a saying like all of them should have been given fair opportunity to seduce him. They each have their own. Who knows what's going to, satisfy that itch, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, Rogar Baratheon's. You also got to think about these are like teenagers and. Yeah. When you're trying to separate them and tell them no, it's only gonna cause them to rebel against that. So that's just gonna push them closer together. So, that it's Rogar Baratheon did not really none of his plans really kind of succeeded in this. Thankfully, for the realm's sake.
Right. Okay, so let's see if we can move past some of that because they go into some great detail here on some of those handmaidens, which is neat. It kind of gets people around Queen Alysanne, and so okay. And then it shifts over to next couple pages there, Sir Matt. It starts to talk about Queen Rhaena and her time at Fair Castle. It says that not everyone welcomed her presence, so it kind of shifts. We kind of talk about all these different rulers again. So we talked more about Rogar there. We talked about his mother and their influence, and now we shift over to Queen Rhaena, and just basically what is happening with her. In Rhaena Targaryen, however, she found a like-minded companion. This is Lady Alyssa. Had been okay. Oh, let me back up. Okay, remember Maegor the Cruel, right?
Right.
His queen who found him. Dead there on the throne. Was that Lady Alyssa? Let's see. I'm on page 163 here, just kind of looking real quick. Had been twice betrothed, once at 12 and once at 16, but she had... No. Oh, she comes up later. I'm sorry, yeah. Because it's mentioned, remember earlier on, it talks about there's 3 queens, but then he says there's actually 4. And
right.
The 4th queen was Maegor's last... Yeah.
Yep.
That's not her. This is someone on Fair Island. It looks like. But anyways, it says it would make it would be a mistake to regard Queen Rhaena's time at Fair Castle as being idle. However, so she was not idle while she was there.
Right. Yeah. That line, it should be noticed. I'm going to paraphrase here that there was a 4th queen in Westeros, the twice widowed Queen Eleanor of House Costain, who had found King Maegor dead upon the throne.
There you go.
She departed King's Landing after Jaehaerys' ascent, dressed in the robes. Yada yada. I don't think that
she
comes
really
up anything
later.
to a other. Yeah.
It
even goes on to say, it just has suffice to say, Queen Eleanor played no role in the events of 50 AC.
Right, of 50 AC, but Jaehaerys later.
She does come up later. Yeah.
Yeah, he courts her. Courts, air quote. Her to kind of come back to a position of power. So we'll get to that later. I was like, wow, is that really already here? But no. So at Fair Castle there, Rhaena is up to something. So not everyone welcomed her presence by any means. Even here on this distant isle, there were poor fellows angered that Lord Mark, like his father before him, had given support and sanctuary to one they regarded as an enemy of the faith. So she's still considered an enemy of the faith because she married her brother. Aegon, who Maegor killed. The crown wouldn't come to him.
Yeah.
And so, and that's part of her bitterness towards Rogar Baratheon. Is that like, okay, you stood up for my little brother Jaehaerys, but where were you when my husband and my brother were dying beneath the God's eye? So
yeah,
that's her grievance, right? The continued presence of Dreamfire on the island was also creating problems. Glimpsed every few years, a dragon was a wonder and a terror to behold, and it was true that some of the Fair Islanders took pride in having a dragon of their own. Others, however, were made anxious by the presence of the great beast, especially as she grew larger and hungrier. Feeding a growing dragon is no small thing, and when it became known that Dreamfire had produced a clutch of dragon eggs, a begging brother from the inland hills began to preach that Fair Isle would soon be overrun by dragons, devouring sheep, cows, and men alike, unless the Dragon Slayer came forth to put an end to the scourge. So, you can almost imagine, Dany has some of those issues with her dragons and Marine eating children and things. So, dragons are, they're going to do what they want, man.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Dany's dragons, it kills, it started where she was, I think, wasn't she, like, killing, like, farmers' goats and stuff like that? Like, hey, this is mine, yeah.
Right, exactly. And then eventually, I think she kills a child.
Yeah, I think she does, yeah.
I think
she does.
If I can remember right. So let's see. So more here that happens with her. I almost need to pull up Rhaena in the wiki. Maybe you can do that real quick, Sir Matt, and just pull up her in the wiki, because for some reason it splits, right? It starts talking more. It continues on with her for several pages. Let's see. Even within the walls of Lord Farman's own seat, Queen Rhaena had enemies. Chief amongst them, his lordship's heir. Sir Franklin had fought in the battle beneath the God's Eye and taken a wound there, blood shed in the service of Prince Aegon the Uncrowned. We're getting like a lot of stuff here.
Right.
A lot of like nitty-gritty history stuff. And it is dry. I mean, it is super dry.
It's dry, yeah.
But let's see. His grandsire had died upon the battlefield together with his eldest son, and it had been left to him to bring their corpses home to Fair Isle. Yet it seemed to him that Rhaena Targaryen showed little remorse for all the grief she had brought to House Farman. So I think that's sort of, regardless of whether you fought for her husband or not, sometimes when you don't win the battle and you look at it and you're like, what did we fight for? You know what I mean? Like, we lost brothers, fathers, uncles, whatever, and so now her presence here is kind of overshadowed by a lot of the loss and death that took place beneath the God's Eye. So
yeah, and so I have Rhaena Targaryen pulled up here. She's like Queen of the West, and then she becomes kind of Queen of the East, and she was also a Black Bride of Maegor. Her kind of history is it's cool. It's world building. Again, that's kind of what Fire and Blood is. It's world building. We're getting more of that stuff. She's kind of just a political player who she gets sent kind of over to the Westerlands.
Yeah, that's where she
kind of. Yeah. It's almost like Warden. Like, she basically has that position of Warden of the West, and then she comes back to Warden of the East. And she later has an issue with Alyssa, right? Which is who ends up like stealing dragon eggs.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. Let me
from Dreamfire's clutch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. Right. So just I can see that here where she went to Casterly Rock right upon Dreamfire. Yeah, 'cause she wasn't wanted there at Fair Isle. Didn't stay there long at all. Yeah. Yeah, she kind of moves around a little bit here.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm going to read this a little bit. The Lord of Casterly Rock wanted more than just a highborn guest. Queen Rhaena realized then, beneath the warmth of his veneer, he was too cunning and too ambitious to settle for so little. He wanted an alliance with the Iron Throne, possibly through marriage between her and his bastard, or one of his true-born sons. Some union that would raise the Lannisters up past the High Towers, the Baratheons and the Valerians, to be the second house in the realm. He wanted dragons. With dragon riders of their own, the Lannisters would be the equals of the Targaryens. They were kings once, she reminded Sam Stokeworth. He smiles, but he was raised on tales of the Field of Fire. He will not have forgotten. Rhaena Targaryen knew her history well, the history of the freehold of Valyria, writ in blood and fire. We cannot remain here, she confided to her dear companion. So, again, you see people kind of vying for just position with the Targaryens, and she's someone who's kind of up for grabs, has, a dragon, Dreamfire, and so, as you say, yeah.
Right. Well, as the Targaryen family expands, right? Because remember, right now it's just getting bigger and bigger, and during like the Dance with Dragons, it's like a huge family. Enough to where you can have like a war, in an entire like war, between both sides. So you're gonna have those like sisters and brothers that aren't really in the line of succession that are going to be viewed as like political assets. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of her role.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Good point. Okay, so once you're done with Rhaena, dude, this chapter is so long. It's so ridiculously long.
It is.
There's the little uprising. They kind of talk about the uprising, and even more dire was the situation in the north. Brandon Stark, Lord of Winterfell, had died in 49 AC, not long after his return from the Golden Wedding. The journey, the Northmen said, had asked too much of him. His son Walton succeeded him, and when a sudden rebellion broke out in 50 AC amongst the men of the Night's Watch at Rimgate and Sable Hall, he gathered his strength and rode to the wall to join the Leal Watchmen in putting them down. So there's this. Remember earlier I was talking about some of the things that Jaehaerys will kind of face, and this is right at the end of his regency. And so Rhaegar is actually a big, kind of part of this. Just talks about, who all was kind of involved in some of this rebellion up there. And the uprising proved short-lived. For every man of the Night's Watch who joined the rebellion, 10 remained true to their vows. So it was some of the poor fellows and warrior sons who had been sent up there beforehand. Remember how they were disbanded, and a lot of them were sent to the wall. So they kind of caused some trouble up there. And anyways, Lord Walton pursued them, but 2 days north in the snow of the haunted forest, he and his men were set upon by giants. It was written afterwards that Walton Stark slew 2 of them before he was dragged from his saddle and torn apart. Jiminy Christmas. Good grief, how did I miss this part? Jiminy. So there's a little action in here. There's a little action right in this bit. Yeah, so that's some of the happenings around the 7 kingdoms there. Let me see here.
And okay, do you want to just skip to the end
now,
or do you want to? Yeah.
Okay,
go ahead. So it basically ends. I mean, even the ending of this chapter is kind of like boring. Like to be honest, just like on the 20th
I think I read the only action there.
Right, yeah. Jaehaerys is now old enough to rule in his own right, with no further need of a regent. All across the 7 Kingdom lords and small folk awaited to see what kind of king he would be. So, the funny thing is, before we got Fire and Blood, we were like, man, I really hope we get a lot on Jaehaerys. Well, I think we got a little too much on Jaehaerys.
Yeah. Right. I mean, there is actually more here than I thought. I must have drifted off midway through that whole. I didn't catch the whole uprising part, so that's kind of neat. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. I mean, so yeah, it's all just the vying for power and people, the little bit of uprisings, dealing with his own family, really, and their want and need for power or belonging or something, So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just this chapter. Going forward, the rest of the book gets a little more exciting, and there's always something going on. But this chapter is just one of those ones. And to be fair, World of Ice and Fire got kind of like that sometimes, where it's just like going through then this guy took over, then this guy took over, and just kind of it's kind of building characters, fleshing stuff out. So,
right. Do you know real quickly? Does this chapter end with, let's see, with Rhaegar being put out as Hand, or is that the next chapter? Is it the next one? Okay. So we'll hold off on that. Yeah, because his plotting and scheming, I'll have to go back and look here. He's up to no good, man. Well, no, right here. So let me see. Found man. Yeah, he starts to kind of put forward someone else. Princess, I don't even know how you say her name. Arya, not Rhaella. So Rhaella's, I'm sorry, Rhaena's daughter. And
right.
so that kind of gets him in big trouble right at the very end of the chapter there. Yeah. So anyways, it's just sort of a, he tries to put forward, the princess because basically Jaehaerys will. I don't know what ticks him off so much that he won't just let the marriage be. You know what I mean? Why is it that big of a deal? Is it just because Jaehaerys slights him?
It's just
Sir Matt?
Well, it's a lot of people. They want to have some sort of say in it because also it still is a marriage that's going to upset the faith, and so then that's
problems
the faith can be a powerful ally, and so you don't. I mean, if you go and you look at regular history, I mean that's something that Napoleon had to deal with, right?
Okay.
That was kind of you go back. That was the church was such a big player in that period of time, like 14, 15, 16, 1700s. The church was an enormous player, and you kind of see them lose a lot of that somewhat of political power at the end of the 1700s, early 1800s. I mean, they had enormous political power before that, and so maybe that's what he's viewing. And so in a Game of Thrones, the faith seems like it comes in and out of power. Obviously, in the main series, with when Tommen is king, they are such a huge player with the High Septon or the High Sparrow and stuff like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good point. So, I get it. I mean, and it's also though I partly think he's just a little bit bitter. That he put his forces behind Jaehaerys and helped him win the crown, and then it boils down to the point where he's suggesting that Rhaena, who he didn't go for as the queen, he starts to suggest that they move her daughter into the position of queen, and replace Jaehaerys to the point where he's fired, from the council. He's let go by Alyssa Valerion. So, that really turned sour for him in the end. But he did a lot of good early on, and then we'll kind of see what happens to him rest of his life there. But yeah, that is that chapter. Next week, what do we have here? We've got a time of testing. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Jaehaerys. It's when Jaehaerys becomes king. So he'll be king, and it's his first year of ruling, and it actually picks up really fast. Yeah, so it is.
Kind of coming of age.
Unlike this chapter, which is quite dry, as we were kind of saying, and probably lost half our listeners through. This next week's Fire and Blood chapter picks up quite a bit. So
awesome. Okay, cool beans.
Yeah. So all right, let's go ahead and move on over to the main chapter reread. This week we are going to be taking a look at Daenerys 5. Last week we were in Eddard 12. Ned had now known the truth of what Jon Arryn died for. He also learns from Pycelle and Peter Baelish that Lord Tywin Lannister was preparing for war. Later, Ned met with Cersei and tells her that he will tell Robert the truth when he returns. Offering her a chance to flee and save her children, Cersei warns Ned that he's made a mistake.
Yeah.
The last time we were with Daenerys which was a couple weeks ago.
Right.
The Khalasar had entered Vaith's Dothrak. As they rode up the God's Way, Daenerys discussed the pros and cons of Dothraki combat skills with Jorah Mormont. Mm-hmm. Once they had settled in, Daenerys had invited Viserys to have dinner with her and tries to make a peace offering with new clothes. He becomes angry, grabs her. She hits him hard with a belt and tells him to leave. This week in Daenerys 5, Daenerys eats a stallion heart as part of a Dothraki pregnancy ritual. Afterwards, she bathes in the womb of the world and goes to the reception feast. Viserys soon arrives, drunk and screaming. He draws his blade and demands what he is owed. Khal Drogo gives him a crown of molten gold.
Yeah.
So this is a chapter that, again, the show does a really good job of. Actually, all the pictures in the wiki are from the show. There's not even a lot of just general artwork that people have done of this. In the show, it's two different scenes. I believe it just shows where up to her eating the heart and Viserys kind of sees everyone cheering for her and he leaves, and then later it cuts back to him kind of stealing. Or no. He was going to steal stuff. And Jorah Mormont kind of catches him, and then he ends up walking away, which I don't believe is in this chapter. And he tries to steal one of the dragon eggs so he could buy a ship and just get out of there.
Yeah.
And Jorah Mormont stops him, and then he comes in drunk, and the same thing. He gets a crown of gold, so for the most part it goes the same way. So if you're a show watcher, which I know we have, and you're coming into this chapter, it's pretty similar. So
yeah, it is. All those things, that happened in this chapter. Like you said, the show just kind of divides it up a little bit differently, for sure. So, buddy, I tell you, when I read this chapter, my heart just ached. You know what I mean? It just really was aching from the minute we start here. So, could have to do with the eating of a heart. I don't know. So
yeah. The heart was steaming in the cool evening air when Khal Drogo set it before her, raw and bloody. Her arms were red to the elbow. Behind him, his blood risers knelt on the sand beside the corpse of a wild stallion. Stone knives in their hands, the stallion blood looked black and flickering looked black in the flickering orange glare of the torches that ringed in the high chalk walls of the pit. Dany touched the soft swell of her belly, sweat beading. Oh, there we go. Sweat beaded her skin and trickled down her brow. She could feel the old woman watching her, the ancient crones of Vaes Dothrak, with eyes that shone dark as polished flint in their wrinkled faces. She must not flinch or look afraid. I am the blood of the dragon, she told herself as she took the stallion's heart in both hands, lifted it to her mouth, and plunged her teeth into the tough, stringy flesh.
Yeah. Doesn't that just...
Oh, sound delicious.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever eaten heart? I mean, like, is that a thing? You know, like,
I'm sure some people have. Yeah,
just crazy, man. She's got to keep that down, and what's neat, they go on to kind of talk about how leading up to this, her handmaidens had helped her prep for the ceremony. You know, because like it was really important that she keep this heart down and show strength in front of the other former, whatever they're called, Khaleesi's, here in Vaes Dothrak. And so they had, like, what were they? They were giving her, they dined on bowls of half-clotted blood to accustom her with the taste. And then Eerie made her chew strips of dried horse flesh until her jaws were aching. You know, that heart was super tough, and so she's just tearing at it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty much like all muscle, and Dany has to eat the whole thing.
Yeah,
you can't throw up. Like, you need to eat the whole thing, and it's a ritual to kind of show that her child will be strong.
Yeah, dude, it's nuts, man. I mean, dude, what is Gur thinking? Because this is just it just cracks me up, man. Like, okay, so she's eating this heart, and she does a great job, gets it all down. As you said in the summary, she's going to go out and bathe in this pool. And the one thing that was missing from that summary is this turns on Khal Drogo. He is turned on by this, you know? I mean, his wife just, pounded this heart, goes out here and bathes, and he just has his way. And then, he's just super proud. It's just a crazy good moment for the Dothraki. So...
Yeah, hey, man, everybody's got their thing. Yeah, and Khal Drogo's thing is watching people eat hearts. So,
Yeah, eat your heart out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, okay, so her finally, that part's just all describing there might be some symbolism and different things in there. The one thing you got that caught my attention, we hear more about it later, is just what Khal Drogo's wearing. The gold rings in his mustache, the gold bells in his braid, the big there were medallions weren't there around his belt somewhere, which is important later. So, So it kind of describes him, and I thought it was neat too. She kind of does really know him. His face, it says that his face doesn't betray the thoughts within very often, but she feels like she's starting to kind of read the subtlest of facial expressions from him to tell when he's happy or pleased or proud, so that's kind of neat just to think about, because he's real mysterious to us because we just don't understand him,
right,
super foreign. So She gets everything down, and the oldest of the crones, bends over, raises her hands up in the air, and does some, Dothraki speak, and proclaims the prince is riding. He is riding. The other women answer. The bells rang. A sudden clangor of bronze birds. Deep-throated war horn sounded its long, low note. So this is a big deal for everyone here. We find out that one of the elders there they start to chant and proclaim that Dany's baby, that the child here is the stallion who mounts the world.
Yeah. Which and as we often bring up the idea of Azor Ahai and the prince who is promised, and
sure.
The last hero is the stallion who mounts the world is also another. I think it's another piece of that too. So clearly the Dothraki have their own version of this idea of this great hero that is going to come and lead them to prosperity.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they do, and she kind of it's something that Dany thinks about, later. Obviously, like when we know everything that kind of takes place, and she often thinks on Rhaego, her son, her air quote son. I mean, they proclaim strongly that this is a son.
Yeah, I mean, as swift as the wind he rides, and behind him his Khalasar covers the earth, men without number, with aurochs shining in their hands like blades of razor glass. Fierce as a storm this prince will be. His enemies will tremble before him, and their wives will weep tears of blood and rend their flesh in grief. The bells in his hair will sing his coming, and the milkmen in the stone tents will fear his name. The prince is riding, and he shall be the stallion who mounts the world.
Yeah.
So just in thinking about like Azor Ahai and stuff like that, there's definitely some similarities in that idea. Fierce as the storm, this prince will be. So is it the idea of him possibly being a prince, right?
Prince,
Daenerys
yeah.
Right, yeah, a prince rather than a cow, right, or kind of both. And it could just be because Daenerys, I think, is the one who is, I think that's Daenerys's idea of him. Right, yeah. So there's that as well, and the idea of the bells in his hair will sing his coming. Right, this is the song of ice and fire. Is that something that could come as well? So,
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, lots of good parallels there, and just different variations. Culture to culture, having their own variant of the tale.
Right.
Yeah, of that great hero. So. So actually Dany's the one who names him Rhaego, and to jump ahead, later on Khal Drogo kind of asked about that. He likes the name, and she explains that it's sort of it's a combination of his name and Rhaegar, which I think is pretty awesome, because she super respects both of them. They're both warriors, and everything she's heard about Rhaegar, he's this awesome dude who she's super proud of, and wants to name her son after. So, but yeah, I also like the bit where the Dosh Khaleen are kind of like seen as the wisdom and the authority there in Vaes Dothrak. Like they're in charge, man. If they say something to Khal Drogo and these other cows, they listen. They really take their words to heart. So I thought that was kind of an interesting part of their culture. They're super revered and respected, and this is the place where the various calls will gather and stuff. And so the stallion who mounts the world, we find out, is one who, as you said, will kind of bring all those people under one, leader, one group. So a big deal, because right now, Khal Drogo is the strongest. There are other, calls out there who kind of, gather and lead their groups here to Vaes Dothrak. So, his person, his descendant will be much more than all of them. Okay, let's move on here a little bit.
Yeah, and then he shall be called Rhaego. And then they start screaming Rhaego.
Yep. Rhaego, Rhaego, Rhaego. They see the Khal Drogo looked down at her. His face was a copper mask, yet under the long black mustache drooping beneath the weight of its gold rings, she thought she glimpsed the shadow of a smile. Is good name, Daenerys' wife, moon of my life, he said. And so he's happy with the name, and she's really, he's learned a few words, some of the common tongue, and so we hear little bits and pieces of that. So yeah, they rode to the lake of the Dothraki called the Womb of the World, surrounded by a fringe of reeds. The water was still and calm. So this is where she goes in and kind of like bathes or just immerses herself in there. They said there was no bottom to it. Eerie said there was no bottom there. She's doing her thing, goosebumps everywhere, nakedness everywhere,
everywhere, yeah,
everywhere.
Yeah.
It's just, which is great, right? Let's see. Yeah, she's cleansing herself because she's got all that blood all over. It's dripping down her chest. You just imagine it, right? It's just
right.
It's everywhere. And again, Khal Drogo is just turned on.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's because of the heart. Yeah, you could argue that he has. Yeah. Should I just go ahead and say it?
Yeah.
He has a heart on. Okay. He has.
He does. He absolutely does. So yeah, she steps out and I think it even says, 1, 2, 3 pumps and he was good.
Yeah, I mean, hey, he's a 3-minute man, or
right.
That's
well, so. Quickly had to get this done. She's cold and so he's he's proud of her. It's just something they do, man. It's their culture. I think the world could learn a lot from the Dothraki. So no shame there. So he takes her in his arms though, and they have a solid little moment there. He wraps her in her cloak eventually, and they hear the sounds of drums and horns swirling up into the night. The half-clothed woman spun and danced on low tables, so they're headed back to the big feast, and she again kind of, I think she asked at one point Jorah Mormont about what does it mean when she rides past everyone, and they're saying, the stallion that mounts the world. And so she kind of asked him what that means, and he actually tells her more, about that, and she comes over and sits by him. And this is where you had said she inquires about her brother. Why is Viserys not here? And he's out drinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he wasn't a big fan of the fermented mare's milk. I don't know why, but...
Yeah. He'd gone to a market, I think, to get some wine. Daenerys then questions why he was allowed to go alone, right? And why he went alone, because we know that there's potentially bounties out on them. Jorah kind of assures her, he'll be okay.
Yep.
And that nobody is allowed to carry a blade, right?
Yep.
In Vaes Dothrak, and Daenerys states that doesn't mean people still won't die, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And anyway, that you can't have a blade in Vaes Dothrak will come back here in a little bit. So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so then he goes on to kind of tell her about her eggs, right? Her dragon eggs, and she doesn't understand that they're valuable and that's really what he's trying to do is steal those so that he can get an army, and we learned that they're super valuable. With all
because they're super rare, right?
Yeah.
He's like those traders he's been drinking with would sell their own manhoods for even one of those stones. And with all 3, Viserys could buy as many sellswords as he might need.
Yeah.
Then Dany had not known, and then she says, then he should have them, or then he should have them. He does not need to steal them. He only needs to ask. He is my brother and my true king.
Right.
He is your brother, Sir Jorah acknowledged. You do not understand, sir. My mother died giving me birth, and my father, and at the end of the day, you and I talked about Viserys before, Viserys still somehow got her to this point alive in a world where people would, want her absolutely dead and all of this stuff. So, I mean, at the end of the day, don't get me wrong, he's still a total jerk. He's still whatever, but he still has somewhat protected her. Through her time, right, alive. So
even if it's selfishly or for his own reasons, absolutely, she's still here. And she even says she learned a lot about her family through him, and
right.
she could learn about some of that through the history books maybe, but like to hear their nature from her brother was important. But yeah, the whole bit about he's not supposed to be bearing steel, and that was something. So that's one of the reasons why he won't be hurt, right? Is because you can't do that. But they go on a little bit more here. Let's see what else comes up. Dany looked down the length of the long roofless hall, and there he was striding towards her. So now he's coming in, missing a step here and there. He's totally drunk, and he's wearing his scarlet silks.
Yeah,
he's soiled.
Right. Where is my sister? I've come for her feast.
Right.
And he's like, no one should eat before a king. Where is she?
Yeah, and they said that there were more than just Dany and
no, they said there's like 5,000 men in this hall.
Right, yeah, and a lot of them. So there you go, right there. It says, and only a handful knew the common tongue, but that's enough to translate for Khal Drogo or any of his blood riders. So
right,
gotta watch out. And he marches right up to him. He's basically dissing on the whole party here, kind of calling out Khal Drogo. He's there for his army. He wants his crown. He wants what was promised to him. So, and actually, Khal Drogo, he's looking for his place, right? He wants to sit somewhere. He's looking to join the feast. And Khal Drogo actually points back to the very back, where all of the, kind of older / younger / just, maybe some of the crippled, individuals are way in the back hall there. And they call him the Surfeit King, right? Because he, bring a cart for him,
Right, yeah, the Cart King, right? Which they
yeah, the Cart King. So, and they're all kind of laughing, and Jorah Mormont is trying to help him. He's trying to get him to sit down, trying just to, to get him to calm down, and he actually knocks him down to the floor. But then when he does that, her brother drew his sword, and that really, gets everybody's attention. There's hissing. I mean, that's just, you can't do that. You can't be bearing steel here, and you can't be spilling blood, in Vaes Dothrak. So that violates their laws. They're screaming at him, and Dany the whole time is just like, she's still at this point trying to save her brother's life here. Now she realizes, that he's really in a pickle. It's a sad kind of thing, man. I mean, how do you get that?
Yeah, she's like, the blade, you must not, please, Viserys, it's forbidden.
Yeah.
And he, and Jorah is kind of get her too, and they say they can't kill us, they can't shed blood here in the city, but I can, right? Because I'm like, and then he like points the sword like right at Daenerys, right? And tells like, I'll cut out your baby, right? If I have to, right? And that is when Daenerys, I think, kind of changes her demeanor, and I think she kind of accepts that, yeah, this is over.
Yeah. Yeah. This is over. Yeah. She even kind of, some of her handmaidens are like crying. They're kind of like pleading with the cow there, and so enough is enough. He kind of spoke a few words. They get up. Him and his blood riders kind of walk over toward him. It had grown so silent in the hall that she could hear the bells in Khal Drogo's hair chiming softly with each step he took. And they march right up to him, and he basically says, she translates and she says that he says, "You shall have a splendid golden crown that men shall tremble to behold." And the saddest part she says here is that Viserys says, "That's all I wanted. What was promised. That's it." He kind of like holds his hands up to sort of say like, "Thank you. About time. Like that's all I want. I don't want to cause any problems. I just want the crown." But he's already, he basically threatened Khal Drogo's unborn child. You know what I mean? Pointing the sword at his wife and bearing steel. It's just, he's gone way too far.
Yeah, and then and then it happens really fast. It's like a paragraph. It's like within a paragraph, it's like he's alive and then like Khal Drogo takes his medallions. The guy sees him, takes the medallions, put them in a pot, pour it right over his head, and that's
golden
it.
crown, golden crown, man.
And we're down to the last dragon.
Yeah. And Dany's thought, right? He was no dragon. Fire cannot kill a dragon. And so he gets that crown. It's gruesome. He doesn't spill any blood, so Khal Drogo actually still kind of holds to the law because it's just a golden crown. Just melted there, and it's he's shrieking, and it's done for, man. It's a kind of a weird, pitiful, sad scene, but she needs to move beyond him, and so moves the story forward. So, all right, man. I think that we kind of went a little long in Fire and Blood, but it was a long chapter, and then that just the Dany chapter to me is pretty straightforward. These just crossing, getting used to the Dothraki and their culture, is important. It's that world building, as you say, but yeah. So it was pretty straightforward chapter. So on to Send a Raven, my friend.
Yeah. Hey, go. I'll go ahead.
Okay. So we have Sarah Thompson here sent us a little something just on Patreon, and this worked out because by the time this is posted, Sir Matt and I think for the 1st of February, we'll have a pretty cool episode ready to go for you guys on Patreon, and it has to do with her Raven here. So let's see. She says, must have more Summerhall knowledge! ! ! ! ! ! ! ! ! ! If Dunk did end up beyond the wall as Cold Hands, it proves that certain Targaryens have been pointing north for a long while now. Egg, Rhaegar, Aegon the Conqueror, and even the Targaryen who dreamed that the whole family should leave old Valyria were on to something that'll tie the doom and what's to come in Westeros, something potentially bigger than the dragons and the others. So kind of a cool little ominous, just that these Targaryens they're focused on moving north. They move out of old Valyria because of the dreams and the visions that were given to their family there. Was it Daenerys the Dreamer or something like that? And then, Rhaegar, Aegon, these, Egg is sort of fixated on just, the dragons, trying to bring them back, the prophecy, all of this. What's going on at Summerhall? What did happen at Summerhall? The big question, Sir Matt. But actually, you had brought this up. So the reason that we got this Raven was really because at the end of our Black Council episode, you had talked about Sir Dunk the Tall being a certain somebody.
Yeah, and we have a Patreon episode coming out about it, and I don't really necessarily want to spoil it, but just in terms of Summerhall theories and stuff like that, there's been a lot of stuff I've been reading about in like the idea of how is it really that that Egg got these ideas of bringing fire or about bringing the dragons back, right? If you go read a Night of the Seven Kingdoms, those three Dunk and Egg stories, you have. We don't really know. We know that there's Bloodraven, who clearly has something going on with him. He dabbles in the dark arts as well as then becomes the Three-Eyed Raven and all of that stuff. And I think I thought we looked this up the other day. He becomes the Three-Eyed Raven before the tragedy at Summerhall. Well, he disappears. Right, he disappears from the Night's Watch before the tragedy at Summerhall. Is that correct? Okay. Didn't we look that up?
It may be right. Yeah, I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah. And then also you also have Darren, his brother, who has green dreams.
Yep.
We know we meet John the Fiddler or Daemon Blackfire II, who also has green dreams. So is it possible that Egg kind of starts getting this idea possibly through his brother? Maester Aemon is up at the wall as well, and he's studying and doing research. So is it possible, Aemon and Darren, who are brothers, are talking about bringing dragons back, and also that seems to be a big theme of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. So
it does. I was actually reading something. Just something that came to my mind about. I think it's in A Feast of Crows. Maester Aemon is actually, when he recalls Egg, I think he's talking that they're at the Quill and Tankard maybe, and he starts to kind of talk about the big. He goes, that big tall knight that was with him. So he actually knew Sir Dunk as well. I mean, which you could have assumed, but it was just kind of cool to hear Maester Aemon in his old age reminiscing about conversations that he had with Egg when he was much older, after Aemon had become a maester, and they're over in Old Town, having conversations about some of this stuff. I think maybe even before Egg had became king, I would imagine. So yeah, really cool. It's just something that we can kind of continue to talk about later on in our Green Dreams Patreon episode. So
yeah, absolutely. So all right. Well, move on over to Man the Wall here. Just always want to invite people to come check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of the social media platforms, especially the Facebook group. We have a super good group of people who hang out in there and talk theories and speculation. Mm-hmm. And it's a place we kind of go to, and that's how it actually influences the show a lot, because we see what everyone's kind of talking about, and then we can kind of tailor theories and stuff and ravens that we get to kind of coincide with what it seems like where everyone's kind of at in the group and stuff like that. So
yep, absolutely. Yep. All right.
Hey man, it's time to sign off here. We want to thank you for playing the Game of Thrones. In our next episode, we will be discussing chapter 47, Eddard 13.
Yeah. And just a quick shout out to everybody who has recently joined us. We really appreciate your presence here. And we want you to feel welcome, and we want you to join into the book club and send us those ravens. So if you like our podcast, don't forget to subscribe, like us, write a review, leave a comment, or send us a raven at btkcast@gmail.com.
We will see you in a week, and remember that winter is coming.